Good morning. This is Carrie Muchaw, and I am. Oh, and there's a dog talking. And I'm I'm here with Deidre. And last week we began looking at asanas and yoga poses and finding the language of what's going on in your yoga pose. So discovering what is activated, what you're feeling, because we're in a movement of using pure speech and divine body language and beginning to translate what we're feeling in our body and the pattern that is really behind it. And we are conducting a yoga teacher training where we are teaching yoga instructors and how to translate so that when they are in class, they can give decrees and they can ask questions so that people begin to come in touch with what they are feeling and what is truly happening behind that feeling. Because what we are recognizing is that it's not enough to know my knee hurts, or it's not enough to know, oh, I feel my shoulder here, or it's not enough to just say, I love this pose because I can relax into it. It's discovering why you really have those feelings and what is in fact going on in your life, and it's shown up on the mat. And with decrees we can shift it. If we have anything that is not supporting us, we can move it to the other side of what we call a feeling scale so that we get our highest choice. We have the feeling that we were divinely meant to have instead of being caught up in the other. What I find commonly in yoga classes is people tap into something they're feeling, sometimes sadness, sometimes anger, sometimes frustration in a pose. And what's happening is they're not moving it to where the higher choice, the emotion that really serves us, that we were divinely meant to have. They're just leaving with, okay, I recognize that my hip's tight, or I recognize that my shoulders are, I got to focus on bringing my shoulders down. Yes, awesome. What does that mean? And that's what we're here for. And I've been teaching yoga for 19 years now. And I have been studying pure speech and divine body language for 2 years now. And I've just recognized how magnificent it is to use it in yoga classes. And Deidre is the anatomy teacher in yoga teacher training. And I brought her on board with this because she brings so much to the table with her anatomy knowledge to help us unveil what is actually happening in our bodies. So Dee, go ahead and take a minute and just introduce yourself if you would.
Yes, so I am Deidre Doggett, and I've been dabbling in yoga for almost 17, 18 years, and I have been a physical therapist for the last 15 and have really enjoyed using my anatomy knowledge in this new way, because working with people over the years in the clinic and in yoga, there's just so many questions that I've been asking myself kind of in the back of my mind, like why isn't this so straightforward? Why if I work on this muscle or this joint, why is this person not getting better or feeling better? So through this work with Carrie, I feel like this is just giving me more tools to use in my life and in the lives of the people that I work with. So this has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. So this morning we've been jumping in just to do one pose so that people can get an idea of what we're offering to people that desire to be yoga teachers. And I'm going to be offering a 2-day training for people that are already yoga instructors. And so this morning we're going to take a look at eagle pose and Garudasana. And you know that in eagle pose we kind of get wrapped up with your arms threaded. And so Dee, what is it that you've been experiencing in eagle pose?
Well, I'm kind of fascinated by the extreme binding that is happening with that. And I always kind of equated it to like a spring that's coiled up. And in physics, maybe somebody can recall this. It's the kinetic potential, I believe. It's the energy that's stored up ready to be used into action. So I kind of feel like that's what our bodies are doing by this contracting or this binding, that we're contracting into this state of potential. And it makes some of us feel just in the moment. But it's
The
coming
dogs
out
are
of it.
excited about this.
I am too. I'm barking on the inside. So I feel like that. So it's what you do with that energy next, more so than in the pose itself, which is a lot to unpack that I hope we can kind of tap into here. But I feel like it's leading us to the next step forward, the next asana.
So in eagle pose, what we're recognizing is the binding. And what we know about eagle pose is that it actually addresses every chakra. And so when you're seeing the binding of the legs where it's wrapped around, you have yourself on one foot. So you have one foot grounded into the earth. And then you have the wrapping around allows your hips to stretch, which we find is your second chakra. And then we have your belly button drawn into your spine, which is your third chakra. Then we have the back of your heart space, which is being stretched when your arms are bound. And then we have, often if you use your ujjayi breath, you're activating your throat. And we often, when Dee and I teach eagle pose, when we wrap, we take your thumb and put your thumb on your third eye to activate your sixth chakra, and seventh chakra already being open and allowing yourself to breathe all the way through. So speaking of a bind, what we know and what we often refer to in pure speech is we talk about as we create decrees and we step through and we shift our patterns, that we're having a birth. And so we have a contraction and then an expansion. Often we'll go, oh man, what's happening? This is moving energy. I can feel myself shifting. What's happening? And we'll contract back because it's something that's new and different to us. And we're feeling it perhaps for the first time in a long time. And for some of us, we sometimes feel those uncharted territory. And so we begin to contract and then we expand. And so what Dee was referencing is the binding as a contraction. And what we're seeing here is we're drawing all of our energy in and breathing and activating all of our muscles. And then when Dee and I teach it commonly, you'll have to excuse my when Dee and I teach it commonly, we expand afterwards. And so we come into a big X, spreading our fingers far apart and our hands far apart to allow everything to expand. And I'm finding that in this pose in particular, you're going to find where certain people, my experience is sometimes we can't wrap our legs, and that's okay. And we find people often get they don't enjoy this pose. They're feeling everything is tight and restricted, and instead of coming at it from a place of drawing all of your energy in, and perhaps it may feel like the contraction that I mentioned, like uh-oh, and people are finding that and getting a little frazzled. And as we're coming into a remembering of breathing and remembering, I am okay, and coming into your ease, then you allow yourself to fully expand and everything to move. That's what I have experienced.
Yeah. So, and speaking just to what it requires to be achieved. So we have the element of balance. And one thing with the crossing of legs that I think is worth noting is that when you cross your legs in that regard, what it does to the foot and how you ground, it requires a lot of grounding through your big toe. So normally when you crisscross your legs like that, we want to roll to the outside of our foot because that's where kind of the weight is being shifted. But that requires this compensation of extra grounding through the big toe. So I think you said a little bit of that last week when we talked, and what that means.
Okay. 1 minute. And after our little doggy intermission. Yes, so speaking into your foot and the big toe. So your big toe is about your will. And when you're finding balance in your foot, being able to find your will to stay. And that's what we are finding in any contraction, that when we begin to contract and we see this as a contraction of, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if I can do this. And we often experience those things in life where of a remembering, do you, and I ask the question, can you stay? Because, and when we use the decree of, we'd say to yourself on the inner, I willingly stay, because what I always know in a contraction is on the other side of it is expansion and ever expanding past my known reality. New things occur that I have not seen before, that I didn't imagine that was going to happen. Holy cow, that's a miracle. And so what we're remembering is, and the question I would ask my class is, notice your foot, feel your foot and feel your big toe. Are you willing to stay, remembering that what happens next is glorious? That's what I would ask, because it takes will.
Mm-hmm.
And we're often referred to will in your third chakra, belly button to spine. However, what you're seeing here is what Dee's referencing is, that balance in my toe and how important that is.
How important a big toe is. That's right. Now we know. So the contrast of eagle to many of the other poses is that the hips are being adducted and internally rotating, whereas almost everything else is abducting and externally rotating. So this is one of the few poses that requires the opposite of what we normally do. And that's kind of counter to a lot of us, because we don't go into those extreme leg crosses. And if you have IT band issues or knee issues, hip issues, back issues, that's where this discomfort comes from, because it's taking you into a new place that is a challenge for a lot of people.
And in your IT bands, what we're seeing in your IT bands is the side, when it runs all the way down the side. And what you're finding is, in the front of your leg is supporting yourself. And then the back of your leg is, the back of your leg is supporting yourself. The front of your leg is supporting others. And so what we're finding is that this is the relationship between support. It's working together in a supportive role. And so we're remembering that when we feel those things, as Dee's talking about, when she's talking about adducting, we're drawing everything in, and how profound that we're commonly used to drawing everything out. So the question becomes in that is, have you been looking to the outer for support? Because that's where the outer comes. But when we're drawing in, we're finding the stretch between support between ourselves and others.
Right. And there's not many asanas, even exercises, that require that much adductor strength. That's the squeezing of the inner thighs together. And you spoke last week with tree pose about the inner thighs being related to intimacy. So this is an extreme contraction of that part of your body. And I always put a lot of relationship between adductors and pelvic floor, or mula bandha. So where does that lead us to? Because I'm curious on that.
On mula bandha?
Right. So the binding of your legs, the adduction strength that it takes, that contraction, and how that kind of energetically pulls up through pelvic floor to third chakra.
So your first chakra is going to be security.
Mm-hmm.
And then your inner thighs are going to be intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the times what we do find in this pose is people are not activating those two areas that you're speaking of. They're just hanging out because they're caught up in the wrap. Right. And they're going, and they're missing that when we engage, then we can find that we can enter this pose with ease. So with that, what's translating in there is the question is going to be, are you secure in intimacy? Because and intimacy just means being close to people, being around people. And so we're of the remembering of activating security and intimacy. I am secure in intimacy. I am secure in my intimate relationships. And I can allow myself to be intimate because often, and especially what we're seeing in society right now, where we have this whole epidemic, is where people are kind of pressing out. They're all staying inward with a belief that's secure. If I stay inside, then I'm secure. And so we are of a remembering that we have our security in us, and we can have our secure intimate relationships simply by decreeing it. There's nothing on the outside that makes that happen. It's simply us. And without activating that, what you're seeing is people not giving attention to intimate relationships. Perhaps some of them may not desire to touch them or haven't touched it in a while. And you want me to activate that and believe that I have secure, intimate relationships?
Oh, that's okay. So that's funny you say that, because we always feel that need to stretch it. We got to stretch the adductors. We got to, because I'm tight here. I'm tight here. I'm tight here. Well, we're probably tight there because we're not used to activating it and calling on it like we should. So there's this understanding in our bodies that if we have the strength first, then we can move into flexibility, not needing the have to force it. Does that make sense? To have that security in us first, and then to willingly expand or stretch.
Yes.
Going about it the opposite way.
Yes, 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 because we are in this movement of we always have to stretch, we always have to stretch. And what's happening in this pose is the outside of your hips, your IT bands are getting stretched while you're activating your your intimate relationships, because it's being drawn all in together. And it is an area. And when we're saying activate, the activation is feeling. Feel your intimate relationships. I can trust and feel secure in my intimate relationships. And those are the decrees, because it's going to take will to do that too, which is going to wear your third chakra, where the belly button to your belly button to your spine is so important. Because we do see in this pose also, you'll see people crunch up and they'll roll over sometimes. And I often will draw them back so that they're straight up and down, and they're drawing their belly button into their spine, feeling the engagement of their support so that they find all of their support.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I guess we can move up to the shoulders, because that's, other than hips having to adduct and internally rotate, which they're not used to doing, here we are asking the shoulders to go into this extreme adduction, internal rotation. And that's a stretch that I see that 99.9% of us need to do. So we're more so opening the back of the heart and asking, because when we close in the front, when we're bound in the front with the arms, we have to take the breath somewhere new. And that's to the back of the heart, where we're not used to breathing into. And, it's one for us to learn how to breathe through the diaphragm and through the belly. And now we're asking our bodies to breathe to the back of the ribs, which is a new sensation for a lot of us.
Yes. And so to the back of your ribs and to the back of, so what's happening is when you're bound in the front, and we find people often shield their hearts, they cover their hearts. And so they have this binding here where all of this is coming forward, and we're taking the focus actually to the back, because And I'm going to tell you that I'm going to move away from the word open heart. So people keep using the phrase open your heart. Okay, there's this thing called open heart surgery, and none of us desire to have that, I do not imagine. So I no longer declare that anymore in any of my classes. I always talk about expansion, because you're expanding your heart and you're allowing yourself to expand further than you ever imagined. So when we're doing this, we're coming into expanding the back of your heart space, and as you mentioned, into your rib cage, and allowing yourself to breathe into that, into the space on the back of your heart space. And what we're finding is, you're saying most people are not used to doing that. They're not used to connecting. It's really interesting about your back. I find so many people are disconnected from their back. And your back is all about support. If you notice, I've worked with many people that go to trainers, and even I've had many men in my yoga classes. They're like, we haven't worked our back muscles. When I start to work on engaging serratus anterior or anything along the back, they're all, what? This is foreign. And you're going to find that in certain people, because this is stretching. This particular pose is stretching your support. And my question is, can you stretch your support past your known reality? Have you had an experience where people commonly believe support is one way? This is the way I'm going to get it. Perhaps it's at work, you feel you're going to get it this way. Perhaps at home, you have a clear definition of, if as a woman, you may go, oh, my support is my husband comes home from work, he takes care of this, I take care of that. And these are our roles, and this is how I have support. And if we limit it with that, we are not going to come into that next piece of full expansion, because here we're seeing where we're drawing all of our energy in, expansion across the back. You're finding your supportive movement. So you're expanding your support. And then when you're going to reach your arms out and expand even more, so that you begin to feel all the energy go through your heart space and ignite your entire body, are you going to keep that at a limit? Because if we have it in one way, we will only get it in one way. So we are stretching support past our known reality. And that's coming into the decree, really is, I give myself permission to feel all my support. And it's my divine support, and it's allowing myself to feel all of my support. Because it's going to require allowing it in and allowing ourselves to feel the expansion, stretching my support.
And there's that relationship with the shoulders too, that when you do the binding, it's almost impossible to do the bind when your shoulders are drawn up towards your ears. So calling back to burdens and blessings, to get the bind, the shoulders need to sit down. Otherwise, otherwise it's impossible. Well, achievable, but much harder to do.
It's going to be much harder. I mean, is it harder to walk around in life believing that it's a burden? And so what you have here is, you have burden attached to support.
Mm-hmm.
And attached to intimate relationships. Wow, that's a big connection right there. So we're coming into the remembering that, do you have, and the question, when people shrug their shoulders and I look around the room and people's shoulders are all up, I'm going to ask, do you feel support is a burden or a blessing? Are you allowing support in? And this is, again, not what the definition of support looks like this. This is how, well, yes, I allowed my husband to help me the other day because I told him he could do this and he could do that. Groovy. That's really limited. And so what we're seeing is, if you see that in a room, we immediately say, okay, coming into sliding your shoulders into blessings, the remembering that it is a blessing to be supported. Because if you've done everything yourself in your life, you've got to do everything. You have that story going on. You're going to be like this possibly because you're not enjoying how you're getting support. However, You may believe it's the only way to get it is I've got to do it all. I've got to do it all. And you're of the remembering that because your back is going to be support from others. So you're of the remembering that I can receive my support and it's a blessing. So I give myself my blessings here. And when you come into your blessings, as you said, it's so much easier because this whole wrapping thing, people, they get their shoulders up, and the moment that they seat them down, even if it doesn't wrap all the way, that's okay. We're okay. It's a remembering that you can seat your shoulders down and you can experience ease and meet yourself where you are in the pose. That's what we're often asking people is, okay, we'd say to them, if your arms don't cross all the way, it's okay. Can you meet yourself right where you are? And come into a remembering of support being a blessing.
So all of this is going to make the participant students, anybody who's attempting this pose, to feel something completely new in this pose. That what you're asking of yourself and the introspection that you may encounter while in the pose, to feel a completely different way. And then from that, how do you feel going forward? Do we come out with this resurgence of energy and life to then open and expand? Or do we come out of it halfway where we're still rounded and we never remember what we just gained and come out with full expression? Or do we come out and still remain tight around the chest like we normally do? It's what are you gaining from this pose to take with you into the next?
Yes, and this is a pose that I would teach on the floor first. Mitch, you and I do that a lot, where you lay on your back and you do it on your back so that you can come into touch with this, because there's a lot of verbiage in this. So you see there's a lot of movement in this pose. It's a very, very powerful pose. And if we'll slow down and give it the attention, you can see all the miracles that begin to come out of it, where people begin to understand that I can be supported in my intimate relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we can tie all of it together. And I willingly receive my supportive relationships. And when we're on the ground on our back, then we can do that. And then, as you're mentioning, how are we going to go forward from that? We commonly have them come into their big giant X with a remembering of allowing them to feel all of the energy returning. And that's what's returning for us when we explore new and different. When we step into what is truly happening, then we can move.
Yeah, that's the whole game changer. Instead of moving through poses empty and having all this knowledge behind it, I mean, how much better are we going to feel inside and outside?
Absolutely.
A fun little tidbit is that you can do eagle legs from down dog to plank. So you can do, kind of like a hovering tabletop with your legs crossed. And then you can and then uncoil and then open to the three-legged dog.
Oh, I see. So in that, experiencing your legs.
Yes, so you can take take the element of eagle, like you said, on your back, but you can take those elements into other avenues. And that's where the fun part comes in, is as you practice more through the years, and as teachers practice more, you're getting more creative with those elements, so that we have the classic asana, but we're not limited by those. You can take those elements and make it new and still harken back to the classic, but take it somewhere completely different.
Yes, because I can imagine when you wrap your legs and then you lift one leg into
Yes.
three-legged dog, what an expansion that you have there. And you can't, and to your point, you can work just the lower, the lower body in eagle, or you can work just the upper body in eagle, adding it on to something
Right.
else with the remembering of what each piece means.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And
So
be-
your crescent lunge with eagle arms into the classic expansion.
Yes. So yes, so being able to add these things in there and noticing the pieces of them are so important. I mean, because you can even go, we could even go further with Eagle. But we're gonna keep it right there because
I know I'm getting excited now.
I know we can go into the elbows and I mean, it's just you can keep going. This Eagle is a really in-depth one. It has a lot of pieces to it. So for yoga instructors, if they can take part of it and just begin to notice, because we begin to notice, we always, as yoga teachers, we look around the room and we notice what's going on. And so we begin to come into these new and different questions
Mhm.
of burdens and blessings and what you're experiencing, instead of just slide your shoulders down, or instead of just drop your shoulders, or notice if your shoulders are up, put them down. I mean, I've heard all kinds of cues, and now with these cues being able to touch, sliding back into remembering your blessings and that support. Are you allowing support to be a blessing? And that just, that we get right down into exactly what's going on, and then being able to add the decrees, or being able to, after they've noticed and we come into expansion, now claiming, I have my supportive, I have my support, and I have my supportive intimate relationships. Being able to claim it right after that is going to get that movement, and allowing your students to say, hey, say that on the inner, say, I allow myself to fully experience my support, or I allow myself to fully feel my support, or I can receive my supportive intimate relationships. And we're of an allowing. We're of an allowing, because, and then you'll often hear me in decrees, I allow, or I willingly receive. You're going to put the will in there, because that's going to go ahead and ignite your will, which we spoke to at the very beginning. So adding that. So there's several different questions that can be asked. They're all the same. It's what is resonating with you that draws these pieces together for your class. This is just amazing. I just imagine how amazing it is. And I know when I teach a class, the difference afterwards in their face, where we often teach classes and people feel refreshed afterwards. I do notice a difference is they're understanding what's happening in their body, and it may be met with deep feeling, and that's okay, because if we've been absent from it from a long time, it will require deep feeling to return.
Mm-hmm.
And that's glorious, because then we get to experience love at a greater level.
Yeah, there's so much more you can take off the mat with you.
Absolutely, and that's what we're here for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'm gonna wrap it up for this morning. We're gonna come back tomorrow morning, and Dee and I are gonna do another pose, and we're not gonna tell you which one yet. So, and remember that we are of a remembering in this movement, which I call this a dynamic movement, because it's ever changing and expansive, ever expanding, and we are remembering that our greatest weakness will become our greatest strength. And that's when we move what, if we've had a huge burden, we move it over into blessings. And it's that, if you've had life as a burden, if you've had support as a burden, when you begin to shift it into a place of blessings and you claim your blessings, that much, that big is waiting for you and more. And that's what's so glorious, is the return on this. Just heavenly, heavenly, heavenly. Okay, thanks, Dee, and we'll see everybody tomorrow morning. Namaste.
Namaste, friends.
Bye.